Welcome to the LeaderTreks Youth Ministry Trainingcast with Doug Franklin, where we help youth workers like yourself be intentional. Welcome to the LeaderTreks Youth Ministry Trainingcast. I'm Taryn.
And I'm Doug.
And we are glad to be back with you. It seems like it's been a little while since we've gotten to share with you a new Trainingcast episode.
It hasn't been a little while, it's been a long time. But we shoot a bunch of them at one time, and then it looks like we're still doing this.
That's true.
But those ran out a long time ago.
They did.
Yeah.
We've missed you. Maybe you've missed us. We would like it if we were missed. But Doug, you've been doing a lot of traveling recently, going to a lot of different training events, and one of those events is our refuel retreat.
Yep.
And this year we've been talking about developing your dream team, and we want to bring some of that content into the training cast today.
You know what's been really interesting is that most youth pastors that when we came up with this title, Develop Your Dream Team, we thought people were going to be like, yeah, that's interesting. And what's been, I think, behind the scenes of all this that I've really struggled with is I think most youth pastors don't even think of their volunteers as a team. And I was kind of taken back by that, to be honest with you. Sometimes we create trainings and we think, oh, this is it, And I kind of thought that this time. But I don't know if youth pastors think that their adult volunteers can even be a team, and nor think about what the advantages of them having individual people who support the ministry versus having them feel like they're on a team with a mission going in one direction at the same time. And I just met so many youth pastors in this process of talking about this 3 or 4 times over the last 2 months, is that there isn't even a mindset that I can develop my group as a team, and having that team and its cohesion and what it will actually do for them. So I know it's exciting to say, develop your dream team, but really having a value for your adult volunteers to be a team, all working in the same direction at the same time based on the same mission, actually creates momentum. And I don't know that a lot of youth workers think about developing momentum by developing their team, but it is pretty powerful.
Right. It reminds me of actually a training event that we've run for years for student leaders, and we call it Team Up. And we would start out that training event asking students to think about the greatest teams in history. And of course, when we wrote it, it was the 84 Bears.
Well, no, not the 84 Bears, Taryn. The 85 Bears.
85, my
and
bad.
They are still the greatest team of all time. I'm like, I don't know. Taryn may be fired after this training cast for saying 84 Bears. I don't know.
85. I'm just one off.
That's terrible.
But my mistake aside, I'm sorry, folks. I'll write the Bears later today and apologize. But my mistake aside, I'd like us to think about our youth ministry teams as what if we thought about creating the greatest team in history? I think that mentality
Maybe
would
Miracle
change.
on Ice, or some of the great Patriots football teams, or the Bulls under Michael Jordan. I'm very Chicago oriented.
Right. I mean, if Dan Colwyn were standing right here, he'd be telling us all about the Packers.
Yeah, and we would be just frowning upon him and putting him in the same category with you and the 84 Bears. But anyhow, grabbing a great team can make all the difference in the world. In fact, every youth ministry that I've served in, my greatest priority has been to develop a team, and those teams have carried the day. I've seen teams double the size of youth ministries. I've seen teams be able to really impact students' lives. I've seen teams, when they're working together, stay for a season together, not just 1 year, but to stay for 4 years of a student's life. So teams can make a big difference. And I think that oftentimes when we're hired to be youth pastors, we think, get kids to like us and love on kids. We don't necessarily think I'm a coach and I'm going to build a team. But if you build a team, you can do way more in youth ministry than you can ever imagine with you and a couple of chaperones helping you. That's for sure.
Definitely, and one of the stepping stones in getting to this dream team is moving away from giving adult volunteers a set of responsibilities to giving them leadership and ownership in the ministry, and that's what we're going to highlight today. Doug's going to take us through this process, a strategy for moving away from responsibility and moving into leadership. Now, Doug, we call it the 6-3-1 strategy, but what does that mean? What does that look like?
Well, I think it starts with the youth workers mentality. So here's the deal. If you think that your volunteers can just help you do youth ministry, you're never going to build a dream team. If you think that there are volunteers on your team that can move from that chaperone to mentor or from that volunteer to leader, then you're going to create an expectation that they're going to do that. And then you're going to create training to make that happen. So it starts with believing that your adult volunteers can own part of the ministry. Volunteers do what they're told.
Yes.
Leaders vision things and they own something and they take care of all the details to make it happen. So just think about this in your youth ministry. What would happen if you had 2 more leaders in your youth ministry? What difference would that make? When I ask youth pastors that question, they always do this. Oh yeah, that could make a huge difference, right? Just 2. We're not talking about a huge tipping point. We're talking about a small tipping point. And so I think when we think about this, we really have to understand that all we're doing is looking for a few people that can move from volunteer to leader. And when they do that, man, it makes a huge difference. When I was a youth pastor, I used to serve pizza and candy at every event because there only is 2 food groups in youth ministry, pizza and candy. And I had an adult volunteer walk up to me one day and said, I noticed that you only serve pizza and candy. And I said, you are sharp because that's all I serve is pizza and candy. And they said, well, what if we had healthy options? And I was like, are you talking about like vegetables on the pizza? And they're like, no, more than that. And they told me, they said, hey, what if I took all the food and all of youth ministry from retreats to Wednesday nights to Sunday, I'll take care of all the food. And I was like, this is awesome. As long as they have pizza and candy, this is going to be great. No, they actually had pizza and candy, but they also added healthy options to it, and they made it 10 times better. And they began to vision what the food could be at a youth ministry event, and they made it 10 times better. Not only that, they took off me tons of responsibility, and they owned it. I never had to say to them, hey, what are we doing? They had it covered, and they would just ask me, what's my budget? I'd give it to them, and it was done. And having that kind of leadership in the youth ministry made a huge difference. And so when we talk about this, we've got to think differently about how we view our adult volunteers. Most youth ministries use a 9-1 strategy. 1 administrator, who is the youth worker, and 9 volunteers who do all the exact same role. That keeps your youth ministry at a very low and formative level. If you really want to grow your adult volunteers, give them different roles that are available. So I like to think of it as 6-3-1. 6 of your volunteers are thinking about being disciplers. 3 of your adult volunteers for every 10 are thinking about being in a support role, be it prayer support, be it logistical support, being some sort of help in the ministry.
Definitely that planning element.
Owning the snacks, that kind of a thing. And then 1 person doing administrative work out of 10. So you've got 6 out of 10 are doing discipleship, 3 are doing logistics, and 1 is doing admin. When you do that, you spread out the responsibilities and then you open up space for leadership. This creates better balance in our youth ministry, and better balance allows for people to use their gifts in more than one ways. And if you're the lead youth worker right now, you're thinking to yourself, whoa, wait a minute, that could actually mean a lot more room for me to serve students. And it really does. It opens everything up, creates better balance, and then it makes for a healthier youth ministry because your students are actually seeing adults using their gifts in different ways. And then it opens the door for adult volunteers to say things like, hey, I would like to own that area. Or for you to go to them and say, hey, how would you like to own the summer missions trip? Or how would you like to own camp? You seem to be really great at games. How would you love to own games? And you can begin to look at every role that you're doing in youth ministry as a potential leadership lab for your adult volunteers to get involved with and make a huge difference. So I think it creates balance, it creates healthy youth ministry, and it creates an open door. And that open door can lead to a really interesting idea, which is trajectory. And trajectory is a pathway for your adult volunteers to get involved in more roles in youth ministry. So I think of a trajectory as something like this. You would say, hey, when you start in the youth ministry, you'd start on the welcome team as an adult. And then maybe you'd move to an apprentice in a small group. And then the next step would be to be a small group leader. And then if you're really loving the small group thing, the next step would be to be a cohort leader over 5 small groups. And then from cohort leader, you know what we'd talk to you about? Becoming a youth pastor full time. And you might say, Doug, wow, what does that happen? Once in a million, Actually not. It's what happened to me. I started out, I had a secular job. I started out as, I called myself the WrestleMania guy in a junior high youth ministry because my church said I owed them. And I said I'd help out. And before long, I moved into small groups. And before long, after small groups, I was helping develop staff. And from there, I was like, you know what? I love youth ministry. I'm quitting my secular job and I'm becoming a youth pastor. And that was the path I was on. And I've talked to tons of youth pastors that have been on this path. The only thing is I noticed that most youth pastors don't open this pathway up. And when the pathway is not opened up, listen to me, people don't walk down it. Think about it this way. When someone sees a forest, they don't think, I'm going to walk right through that forest. When they see a pathway through the forest, they think, I'm going to walk on the path. Have you created a path for your adult volunteers to walk down that leads them to greater leadership in the youth ministry and potentially becoming a youth worker themselves?
And I want to build on what you're saying, Doug, and highlight the fact that a lot of you as youth workers have really young leaders in your youth ministry. These are the college students and the young adults who are volunteering. They're your millennials. They're coming into now Gen Z, but they are craving two things. One, they're craving somebody to see potential in them. Very few of those individuals have been told that they have leadership potential, that there are leadership qualities. They've never been invited to think about more opportunities or more ownership. You could be that person to extend that invitation for the first time, and the results could be huge. And so they're craving somebody to see potential in them. I also think they're craving development. I notice it in the generations below me as well as my peers. Anytime that they're coming into a role, they're saying, please help me grow. They may not be saying it out loud, but there's definitely a bit of a heart cry for that. You can, again, play that role in helping them envision a trajectory.
Especially if you have an expectation that there's more room for them to grow.
Yes.
Then they're really going to crave that. And I think that there's a way to really think about your volunteers here in a very different way. We're going to put some discussion guide to this and some of the tools that we've used on this. If you ever have questions about how do I create that dream team, come to a refuel, but if that's not possible for you, just give us a call in the office. Taryn or I would love to talk this through about your context and how you could do this at the church that you're at. Because we know if you can grow your adult volunteer team, you're actually going to grow the impact that you have in students' lives and in parents' lives, and that's going to make a huge difference. So don't just think, oh, this is just for somebody else to do. This is actually for every youth ministry to be able to do, to have greater influence and greater impact.
Right, Doug, going back to what you said, it's everybody pulling in the same direction, going towards the same goal. That leads to wildly effective youth ministry. That's what we want to see in your youth group and in your ministry.
We'll see you next time on the Trainingcast.